This weekend we're moving in." My mother squeezed out the sentence as if it were already a settled fact. Two SUVs sat parked in the driveway. The porch light was on, yet the curtains were drawn tight, hiding everything inside the house. My father leaned halfway out the car window, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the building. He kept cursing at me, blaming me for not letting my brother move in. I stood in the front yard, the coffee cup on the grass still steaming beneath my feet. I stayed calm, waiting for them to finish speaking. In their eyes there was a sense of entitlement I knew all too well. I had always known they would show up, because they were used to claiming the stage first in every situation. I am 32, divorced, no children, a woman with a master's degree. I bought this duplex quietly, without telling anyone. That was my deliberate choice. Because my parents have long practiced the art of taking whatever is convenient and calling it theirs. Like the old car they gave me in college. Like turning my bedroom into their temporary guest room. Even the seemingly kind holiday gifts always came wrapped in invisible guilt. Those humiliations were treated like chores to be assigned. What I received was seen as expected. What my brother received was treated as generosity. I no longer wished to fight for things that should be mine by default. But I am not the kind of avenger who screams on the battlefield. I have capabilities. 2 degrees. Patience. A plan. And more importantly, I know how to turn anger into rules and consequences. Starting with Unit A. I tore out the old cabinets, laid new floors, brightened the walls. Then I photographed everything, listed it online, and moved on to renovate Unit B. Calm, organized. A checklist, budget, and timeline for every step. I required every applicant to submit a credit score, references, a background check, and a deposit. This wasn't coldness. It was choice. I knew they would come. So I laid out my cards in plain sight. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease and handed keys to a nurse and a newlywed couple. They moved in their furniture, closed the doors carefully, and thanked me politely. That Tuesday night, the tenants parked their cars out front. I sat on the porch with my coffee. As my father stepped out of his vehicle, he looked at the 2 cars, confusion and resentment in his voice. "How are there 2 cars here?" he asked. I set the cup on my lap, looked up calmly. "They're tenants. 2 contracts. Market rate." The tenants nodded quietly. My mother's face went pale. It was her first attempt to use family as a weapon, only to find that rules had stripped that weapon away. My father lowered his eyes, guilt flashing through them. They tried smoothing it over with, "We're family." I replied calmly, "Exactly because we are family, I didn't throw you out. But I never actually let you in." That night my brother left me a voice message, shouting, blaming me for destroying our parents. His arrogant voice was trembling, not from fear of me, but from the realization that I had changed the rules. The next day, I slipped a lawyer's notice into their mailbox. Clear boundaries. No entry without prior permission. Silence became the judge. I started making the rules visible. Whenever someone rang the bell, I would recite the lease terms. I posted every regulation, property fees, maintenance responsibilities, visitor registration, on the notice board. Whenever my father tried to bypass them, I pointed to the tenant sign-in sheet and calmly asked him to follow procedure. This is part of the shared property. Any entry requires registration and approval. I sounded like a bank clerk, no emotion. They discovered that even blood relatives must go through verification. The conflict escalated. Not explosively, but through slow friction. One night, I received a text from my mother. "You think this will work?" I replied, "I don't need your approval. I only need you to respect the rules." The next day, my father stood on the porch trembling, telling the nurse tenant, "Don't you know this is our home?" The nurse, polite but firm, showed her ID and work badge. I signed the contract. I paid the deposit. This is her legal home. I knew revenge wasn't a single burst of anger. It was every carefully arranged moment of taking back what was mine. I posted visiting schedules and guest appointment procedures. I replaced the locks with smart locks and assigned access only to registered tenants. Every time my mother reached for the doorknob, I watched from the window as her hand froze. Shame and anger twisted across her face. They tried pressure tactics. Mother cried softly in the church, claiming her daughter had turned cold. Neighbors gossiped in the supermarket about whether I was unfilial. Father sought out my former teachers to influence me through public opinion. I handled every attempt as if working through a budget. I saved every text, recorded every call, logged every unapproved entry as a lease violation. They thought shame would bend the rules. Instead, every attempt became more evidence in my hands. One night the calls wouldn't stop. My brother mocked me loudly. "You think those rules make you powerful? You just haven't been humiliated to your face." I muted the phone and slipped a formal penalty notice under their car wiper. Unauthorized entry. Fines and restitution. This wasn't reckless revenge. It was turning boundaries into enforceable cost. Once, at 3 a.m., my father knocked on the door, trying to soften me with tears and memories. His voice cracked. He was sick, he needed a place to rest. Behind the curtain, I looked at him. The man who once read me stories at bedtime. Now a trembling silhouette. I spoke coldly through the door. "If you need help, I can recommend a hospital or assisted care. But you cannot enter without permission." He froze. He realized my calm was not indifference. It was powerful refusal. The peak of revenge is not a dramatic slam of the door. It is their helplessness when privilege fails them. Mother began to call often. Not out of shame, but out of fear of losing convenience. "Can't you be reasonable?" she pleaded. I answered steadily. "Reasonable doesn't mean allowing you to violate others. I will help within fairness, but only if you respect the boundary first." Meanwhile, the tenants lived peacefully. Rent arrived on the 1st of every month. Trash handled properly. Cars parked per rules. They became allies to the system and part of my revenge. When my mother tried to let herself in, the newlyweds smiled, politely handing her a visitor form. Her posture shifted from ruler to requester. Watching her bow her head to sign, that stroke of the pen, was the cost of all my years of endurance. Sometimes conflict brought unexpected warmth. The nurse left a note on the porch. "We understand your decision. If you need help, we can trim the garden." Inside was a single line. "You're doing the right thing." I realized revenge doesn't only destroy. It repairs what was neglected. Father's attitude slowly softened. Not from remorse, but from reality. He saw his name listed on the community board as unauthorized visitor, and felt embarrassed. At church, neighbors whispered. Friendships he once leaned on became fragile. My brother kept yelling on the phone, but when he needed money for car repairs, his message suddenly became polite. "Can I come by to pick up something?" I replied, "By appointment." His words stalled, the sharp edges gone. I built a fence around the house. Not a wall, just a boundary. A neatly trimmed garden behind it. A path that followed community rules. A clear line marking private territory. A small sign on the door. "Visitors by appointment." A quiet humiliation. A shield of self-respect. One day, Father looked at the fence and gave a bitter smile. "You're shutting us out." I stepped closer, handed him an old photograph. Him holding newborn me, eyes shining with joy. "You brought me home back then. Not because of the house or convenience, but because you wanted to." My voice was soft. He choked up, eyes wet. But then the old justification surfaced. "We did everything for your own good." I slid the photo back into my pocket. Care and possession are different. You can choose one or the other. The rules will show which you choose. The fence taught them etiquette. They never thought applied to family. One day, after receiving a visit approval, my mother stood outside the door, waiting for a full hour. She whispered to my father, "Maybe we should learn to follow the rules." My father stayed silent for a long time, then finally nodded. Through the window, I watched them sit together on the porch bench, not entering naturally as before, but waiting to be allowed. In that moment, I knew revenge had achieved its purpose. It wasn't to torment them. It was to rebuild the order of our relationship.